Very cozy. You. God, shitting bricks.
Hiya, so I'm Rachel, I'm from NSR, and I'm going to be moderating this debate, which is for Officer for Welfare and Equality. Unfortunately, Nadia can't be here today. She seems to be confused with the dates. However, we do have her opening statement. So the way the debate is going to work is we're going to have your opening statements, which will be 45 seconds to 1 minute long, and then we're going to have some questions about your each individual manifestos, and then some general questions. You'll then do your closing 1 minute speech, and then we'll open it to questions from the audience. So, Georgia, would you like to start us off with your 1 minute?
I'd love to. Okay, I've made some notes, just I'll refer to them when I need to. My name's Georgia Corbett. I've been involved with campaigning on this campus now for 4 years. For the last 2 years, I've been president of the It Happens Here Society and sat on the executive committee for the Dan Stock Society as well. I've also maintained positions on the LGBT Society, Feminist Society and others. I've taken on additional responsibility as well this year as being disability officer. I think I've demonstrated a history of caring about this type of stuff and worrying about equality and diversity. I've spent years building connections within the university and with external support services, charities and activist groups, as well as setting up a student network within all 4 nations of the UK to combat specifically sexual violence and misconduct. My dedication did not start at university. I grew up in Northern Ireland campaigning for same-sex marriage and abortion rights, finally gained this year. Working with guide dogs and NIs, my mum is a trainer, and I walked 800 kilometres for the Alzheimer's UK when I was 17 years old. I have provided support for and advocated for a large range of students while campaigning passionately on issues such as disability, LGBTQ and sexual misconduct.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Georgia.
Go for it.
Right, and Alice, your 1 minute, please.
Hi, so I've been an activist since I was about 15 years old. First of all, I started campaigning on issues such as neurodiversity, raising awareness, raising money, volunteering with various charities. And throughout my life, I've done a lot of volunteering, done a lot of activism, focusing on things like helping working class students, helping various people from underrepresented backgrounds, and now I'd really like to take on this challenge. I've been on society committees for the past 2 years. I've been campaigning all my life pretty much, and now I am absolutely determined to do this. I am such a passionate person, and I will spend every day of the next year fighting for underrepresented and marginalised groups. I am so passionate about this, and the main points I will be focusing on are LGBT plus awareness, with a special focus on trans and asexuality. I will also
just stop you there, Alice.
Great.
Thank you. Right, so we've got from Nadia. Hi, I'm Nadia Ahmed, a final year English literature student, and I'm running for the position of Welfare and Equality Officer. The reasons why I'd be good for this role are that I've always been passionate about fighting for equality, and I know the importance of mental health being something which can be discussed in an open and judgment-free space. I was social sec for cheerleading in my second year at university, and I loved it because I got to run lots of fundraising events for different minority groups. My favourite fundraiser was for Mermaids UK, a mental health charity for children with gender dysphoria. I am passionate about gender equality and spent 3 months on a culturally immersive volunteering project in Nepal last summer. I'm right for this role as I want to see change, visibility for minority groups, and progression for both mental health and equality. As a queer woman of colour, I understand discrimination personally and want to help create a more inclusive campus. I do not just speak about wanting change, but I actively take steps to create change and challenge ignorance. That is why I'm right for this role. Thank you. So we're now going to move on to the questions to do with your manifestos that you've prepared for us. So to start with you, Alice, in your manifesto, you've proposed encouraging societies to run more sober socials. How do you intend on policing societies and what they want to do at their own socials?
Okay, so obviously it is always for the societies to choose what they do, but I am suggesting extra incentives, extra society grants, include basically more not policing per se, but altering the current requirements for the inclusive societies grants to having at least 50% of the socials to be sober, which I think will be a lot more encouraging for make more sober people feel included. And in addition to this, it might help to combat some of the toxic drinking culture that's really found in Newcastle. I think Newcastle's just been found to be like one of the booziest universities in the UK, which is very problematic, and there are a lot of issues around drinking. And I think the key is trying to get drinking in moderation, trying to make sober people feel more included, and at the same time trying to reduce the harm around drinking, and also raising a bit of awareness about the problems of drinking, how to look after drunk friends, and problems surrounding consent and alcohol as well, which can be quite difficult, especially when you've got quite a pulling culture in some societies, I'd say.
Thank you. And considering that there is already the Sober Socials Society, as well as the fact that societies such as Stew Brew and Cheese and Wine literally depend on having alcohol at their socials, what would be your response to that?
Okay, so any sort of society, even things like Stew Brew and Cheese and Wine, can have additional meetups for perhaps like just cheese, or maybe going out for coffee and stuff and talking about things like the brewing process or something, having a casual catch-up. It doesn't just need to be all around alcohol, and it doesn't mean that they won't be allowed to have just alcoholic socials. It means that they just won't receive that extra incentive. And yes, Sober Socials already does exist, and yes, it's an absolutely brilliant society and it's doing brilliant work. But I think that when students are passionate about things, for example, theatre or politics, they shouldn't be put off from like conversing with those like-minded people just because they're worried about going into that environment where there's a lot of alcohol, or they don't enjoy lots of nights out or pub crawls, for example.
That's great, thank you. And Georgia, in your manifesto, you state that you would want all personal tutors to be given welfare training. Given that the university is planning on changing the role of personal tutors to be purely academic and not supportive in the other sense, would you revise this manifesto point?
My point would be to ask that the personal tutors remain involved in pastoral care. From my perspective, they are vastly better at handling sexual misconduct issues than the wellbeing department often are. And I think to remove the involvement of academic schools, which can be really amazing, is really detrimental. So actually, no, I wouldn't revise it. I would take it to them and ask them to continue with the personal tutors being there for you as a support within your department that has an understanding for your course.
Great, thank you. So Alice, in your manifesto, you talk about running a consent campaign during Freshers Week. Do you think that this will be effective, given that this is already an incredibly busy time for students at Newcastle?
So there are several aspects to this consent campaign. The first one is additional training for societies. Although there is some safeguarding in place for societies in terms of consent, we also need to address issues such as power imbalances. And these training sessions are currently mandatory for society members and welfare officers, so that should not be a problem at all. And if you hold sessions for freshers during induction weeks, which are often mandatory, these first induction sessions, then that helps. I remember during my first freshers week, we were shown the consent tea video, which like everyone was talking about for quite a while, because obviously it was quite a cringy but well done campaign, and I think it's incredibly important to do it at that time, because it's a time basically dedicated to having all these alcoholic sessions and stuff, and that's when the issues of consent do arise, and it's such an important thing to understand. The statistics on consent violations and sexual assault are absolutely shocking, especially when it comes to power imbalances in societies, which is why this is something I'm really emphasising. And also there needs to be additional consequences in place for abuses of power by society members over, for example, inebriated individuals in the societies, especially when committee members have that safeguarding role. I think it's disgusting when that is violated.
Thank you. Is this something you'd agree with, Georgia, because you talk about having drop-in sessions in freshers, And do you think you'll actually be able to get many students to come to this, although it might be useful in freshers? Do you think people will come?
Okay, so from my perspective, one of the reasons I wanted to implement this was I found Freshers Week really grim. Like, it wasn't supposed, like, I thought it was supposed to be really fun and party-ish, but to be honest, I broke my wrist 4 hours in. So I was literally like, this is the worst possible scenario. So for me, it's not only just from a sexual consent perspective, it's genuinely from a perspective of, I would have loved to have had someone to talk to about where to go to get help, how to fit in, you know, where I meet people if I don't get on with my halls flatmates, do you know what I mean? And on the perspective of consent, I think it's so important that we do update on the T video and we continue to build on this kind of information. I think it's so important that this is something that's being focused on here, especially given the stalking incident that happened before Christmas. I think, I do think people will engage with them. And worst case scenario, I'm willing to go around to halls and literally stand there and be like, do you want to talk to me? Like, I would be happy to host the drop-ins at different locations and so on and try and accommodate for the needs. That would be my aim. Thanks.
Thank you. So one of our questions for Nadia, which she's responded to, is one of the main features of your manifesto is having a visibility month to celebrate minority groups. How will you ensure that there are not any culture clashes and that is a safe space for everybody? Just need to get this up on the app. So she has replied with, bear with me, sorry.
That's why it gives me a minute.
She said, I'm planning for each week in the month to focus on a different minority group. For example, week 1 for trans visibility, week 2 for BAME, etc. I will also reiterate the message that whilst each individual struggle is important, the underlying reason for the Visibility Month is that until we can collectively come together and understand each other's needs and struggles, we cannot move forward as a cohesive society. The message of solidarity, regardless of different backgrounds, will be fundamental to the campaign. So this is something that wasn't as pertinent on your manifestos. Is this something you'd like to implement as well, Georgia?
With regards to the International Film and Food Festival, it is kind of the same sort of idea, but specifically focusing on foods and films from specific cultures and minority groups. I agree 100% with what she's saying about the fact that we do need to try and bring communities together and have a better understanding of each other. There is a degree of division that goes on this campus, and the more that we see the racism incidents occur, I think the more aware of it we are. And I think bringing communities together with a Visibility Month or with the International Film and Food Festival that I want to do is really, really crucial to bring our campus together right now.
Thank you. So when organising this festival, what will you actively do to ensure that there isn't conflicts between different groups?
So obviously I would consult directly with the society presidents and groups themselves, make sure that interests are being heard, try and bring people together to try and find balances and how we can make sure that needs are being accommodated across the board. I think trying to bring groups together that maybe don't always agree with each other to try and have some understanding of where the lines are with each other could be beneficial to the groups we have on in our campus. I don't think keeping one group in one room, one group in the other is ever going to create a situation where I'm going to be able to bring them together. And I would like to bring them together and try and find ways to make it an engaging thing where we're all celebrating the diversity of our campus together.
That's great, thank you. So Alice, you've said that you want to run a consent campaign during Freshers. Given that the Student Union already runs a consent campaign, what would be different about yours, and do you think running two would be an appropriate use of SU funds?
Well, absolutely. I think consent is one of the most important issues, and when people violate that, it can not only ruin someone's university experience, but it can ruin their entire lives and also cause people to drop out of university. So I think this is absolutely one of the crucial areas that funds need to be spent in. And when looking at this, we need to see that the current system is completely outdated, and there are several arms to my consent campaign. And the first of all is awareness of what consent is, what constitutes as a yes, what constitutes as a no. Like, it's something that should be incredibly simple, but apparently some people find it so hard to understand. We need to understand to respect each other's bodies, and I think that through additional campaigns that would be possible. And part of that campaign is also this idea that I'm trying to get across of a new system for basically what happens when someone violates sexual consent. And this is transparency with confidentiality. So with the consent of the survivor, I don't like the use of the word victim. it really takes away the person's power. It is always survivor. With the consent of the survivor, what would happen is that the university would be held accountable by the student body for the basically decision it reaches in these cases. Without knowledge of who the victim is, who the perpetrator is, the student body would be made aware of, within limits, what the incident was and how it was dealt with by the university, and how the university is going to change certain aspects so that things like that are less likely to happen. And with that, I think the university will be held accountable to the student body, and it will prevent incidents like the stalking incident from happening again. And I think this is very important, and I think that's absolutely something that needs to be got across in that campaign.
Thank you. And Georgia, you mentioned introducing quiet rooms across the university in your manifesto, including in the student union. The SU space is already being used to its maximum, so where are you proposing these rooms to be, and who are these rooms aimed at?
Okay, so working through Disability Officer this year, I came to realise that this is something that people, as particularly in the wellbeing department, like the disability support advisors, had been campaigning for massively with the university for a really long time. These rooms would be aimed at people who are recently given birth and may need to breast pump and may need to nurse, people with anxiety or neurodivergence who may need some time away. People with varying mental health problems. The idea is that currently within the Students' Union, Monday to Thursday, most of the time, you have 2 or 3 rooms that are not booked between 10 and 4 every single day. I would want to take these rooms and make them bookable between 10 and 4 as quiet rooms. Obviously, we'd consult this with the activities officer, make sure I'm considering societies, but I've continually tracked the room booking service now for about 3 months, and it's consistent. So it does give me the reassurance that that could be in place. They're also being implemented across the university. So Henry Daish has currently got 2 now, and the university just need, I think, an additional push from students to say, we want this, and then hopefully they will accommodate.
Great, thank you. And Alice, you have mentioned introducing drug counselling in your manifesto. Would this be something you'd want to involve the SU in, or would this be involved with external charities instead?
So basically, this is something that's going to take time to implement. Obviously, the university's drug policy is draconian, and obviously it is absolutely disgusting. We need to focus on harm reduction. And there's several points to this, but I will focus on the one that you mentioned, which is the drug counselling. And initially, we would want to work with various charities while we basically try to find the resources to get in, trained counsellors, get them on the wellbeing staff, essentially. It's absolutely disgusting right now that the university will prioritise fines and reporting students to the police over actually giving them the help they need, when I think it's about 36% of students who use drugs do it as a way of self-medicating for a mental health problem that they have. Obviously, we need to be prioritising safeguarding. The university tries to preach this. Why isn't it implementing this? We absolutely need access to drugs and alcohol counselling. And that is something that initially I would say, yes, get involved with charities, and also getting involved with charities such as In the Loop to get access to free testing kits that we can distribute to students, and doing away with the senseless fine system, which ends up punishing the most vulnerable members of the student body. It's an absolutely disgusting system that serves no one. The current methods of what are essentially supposed to be deterrents do not work. They are absolutely failing at their job. This is a system which needs looking at. This is a system that needs review, and it's absolutely time to do that. That is why this is something that I'm going to fight for tirelessly this year, because I assume that most people in this room know someone who uses drugs, know someone who has battled some sort of addiction and has been too scared to turn to the university for help because they've been worried that they're going to get punished or turned into the police or fined, when what they need is help that the university should be providing. Additionally, people battling with addiction should be able to submit that as a PEC form. We should not be forced to struggle through these things alone. The university preaches this to us when we're first joining, that they're there to support us, and they will. And, well, this is how we get that support.
Thank you. Is this something you would agree with Georgia to implement as
Yes.
welfare and equality officer?
So addiction support advisors is something that I think is just like it kind of madness that we don't have it. Like you keep saying, it's just one of those things where the vast majority of students on this campus, if they've not had an addiction, they've worried about a friend, they've worried about themselves, they've worried about addiction, whether you've come from a family as well that may have issues with addiction. These are things that literally encompass our lives, and I think the more that we try to pretend it's not a thing and use deterrence, like you're saying, the more that we're pushing people in these positions into the dark. And 100% SAC and Wellbeing Service would need to look at this.
That's great, thank you. So one of our questions for Nadia was, in your manifesto, you state that you want to introduce more all-gender toilets. New buildings have all-gender toilets. Where would you plan on putting these toilets in older buildings, and would they put at risk the number of disabled toilets? So Nadia has said, the new buildings have all-gender toilets, and that's great. However, we need to see this change implemented across all buildings and across the whole of campus. Disabled toilets are just as vital as gender-neutral toilets, and it should not have to be a choice between the two. Until all-gender toilets are accessible to all across the entirety of the campus, in my eyes, we do not have an inclusive enough space for everyone to feel seen and safe. I would definitely target buildings such as the Armstrong and the Herschel buildings, as they are large buildings and central to campus. So we're now going to move on to some more general questions for you both. So to start with, not only are the waiting times incredibly long for counselling at Newcastle University, this is not necessarily the support that all students that are struggling would want. So what would you offer, Alice, to these students?
Okay, so first of all, the process absolutely needs streamlining. I know many people who've gone to student wellbeing for support because they simply cannot cope with the GP waiting list, and then they've been turned away because they've been told that they're too difficult a case for student wellbeing to manage. They go away from that thinking that, yes, I am too damaged for help, I am too broken, there's no point seeking help anymore. This is disgusting that we have this system in place. And for a lot of people, there ends up being like a cycle where they go to student wellbeing sends them to the GP, and then the GP's like, well, really long waiting list, go back to student wellbeing, and kind of caught in this game of ping pong. What absolutely needs to happen is that we need more specialist counsellors available through student wellbeing who can deal with more specialist cases, and we also need people who can help us with diagnoses. A lot of the time for PEC forms and for help with support during exams and studying, what we need is a diagnosis to get access to that. And unfortunately, it can take about 18 months to get a diagnosis. And so people can realise that there's a problem during the time at university and not actually get diagnosed until they graduate. This absolutely needs to change. We need access to diagnoses through the university. And I'm a psychology student. This is something I'm very passionate about and something that I've been very angry about my whole time at uni. But absolutely, this needs to change. We need specialist counsellors, we need access to diagnoses, and we need a more streamlined system, and we need more drop-in services as well. That is a massive thing, and I hold my hand up. Next year, if elected, I will be available any time of the day. Just drop into my office and have a chat with me. We can have a cup of tea, we can have a cup of coffee, whatever you want, and just talk through your problems with me, please, because we need more. We need like a drop-in service on top of that. But please, like, that's my pledge to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. At the other end of that question, we wanted to know, what would you offer students who don't want to seek the counselling route? What options would be open to them?
So obviously that's a difficult one. But there's a few different things that you can do. in my time volunteering, I've come across a lot of people who say that counselling isn't for them, that they prefer doing other things. And there's a lot of different avenues that you can explore. There's things like mindfulness sessions. I know everyone groans the second that you say mindfulness sessions, but for some people they can be a lot more effective than talking therapies. And also there's things like running arts and crafts sessions, and even having a dog coming around campus. I think we've had Bella, is it, coming around campus recently, which has been lovely. And sometimes it can just be taking a break from your day, just having some time to yourself. And obviously what we would really need to do is communicate with societies such as Mind the Gap to see what people want, what type of different issues they would want exploring. That's definitely the route to go down.
Thank you. And Georgia, what do you have to say about this?
Okay, so in my capacity as disability officer, I've actually been to see Sally Ingram on these issues. The general consensus is that they believe their waiting time is 11 days, and they've done this by exactly what you're saying, streamlining, but removing anyone who needs the care. A lot of the time they're refusing care to survivors, which is a lot of what I do, people with disability, mental health conditions, personality disorders, eating disorders, mental health, long-term conditions are basically being turned away to ensure that this waiting time is made smaller, rather than increasing the number of counsellors, ensuring that there's specialists for things that people need. It is extremely worrying, and I think that the emphasis on this shortening of wait times has basically led to them just turning away larger numbers of people to ensure this shorter wait time, which in of itself I think is an absolute abhorrence. With regards to stuff beyond counselling, I have found myself incredibly benefited by outreach, which is one of the things that I really want to involve in mine, is outreach with regards to being back in nature with John in the Go Volunteer office, doing some gardening, or working with guide dogs, working with local dog shelters, working with food banks. Working with people and giving back to society is one of the things that has definitely enriched my life in a way that counselling often didn't. And I think peer support is also something that is massively undervalued on our campus. Working with other students that have gone through what you've gone through and having that kind of community and understanding is totally invaluable, and is something that I think is a valuable alternative to counselling.
That's great. So in your manifesto you have also, apart from this kind of counselling, you've also talked about bringing in more counsellors who are specialised to deal with certain problems. Do you think within the SU budget this is plausible to implement?
It's more that if it's not plausible, the repercussions are getting to a ridiculous point. How many students must kill themselves or drop out or fail their degrees, or it's not a small amount. 1 in 6 people who go through sexual violence will drop out or experience an additional year as a result of it. That's too many students. And when they're turning them away, yes, students who are women who experience this can go see rape crisis, but what about the male survivors? What about non-binary survivors? People with eating disorders? The waiting list, and they're aware of this. When they turn you away, you are triage level 3, which means that it'll be more than 9 months to a year before you will see an NHS care person. I think we're beyond the point of being can I do it, or is it good enough? It's getting to the point where it's it's this, or your reputation that's so precious to you is very much on the line.
That's great, thank you, Georgia. And in response to this, Nadia has said to us that she would introduce a welfare-focused page with mental health resources such as online OCD and CBT courses, as she knows that people who have used these for hypnotherapy and to combat patterns of behaviour and simple interactive exercises can assist with this. Also, she would encourage self-care and body positivity across the university, creating events and talks to actively raise awareness of these key issues. So our next question is, following the outbreak of coronavirus this year, there have been multiple cases of racism against students at Newcastle. First of all, do you think the university's response has been enough? And secondly, what would you do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? Would you like to start us off, Alice?
Yeah, sure. So I'm pretty sure that the university's, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the university's entire response was to send an email to the student body just telling us not to be racist. Yeah, well done, guys. That's really an effective method. So I mentioned in my manifesto this idea of transparency with confidentiality. in response, and that's actually in response to not only cases of sexual assault and aggression, and like physical assault, not aggression, sorry, but also in terms of discrimination. So any form of serious transphobia or acephobia or homophobia and racism. And absolutely, when any case like this happens, we need zero tolerance. We cannot tolerate racism in this campus. It is disgusting that it happens. It's disgusting that in UCL, I think it was a student attacked in an incident over the coronavirus, like in a race incident. That is absolutely appalling that in this day and age that ignorance is allowed on happens on campuses. And I think that if the university is forced to kind of admit when these things happen to the student body and inform us of how they are dealing with these incidences, then we will be able to hold them to account again.
Thank you. And so as Welfare and Equality Officer, what would you do in that position to protect students against cases like this? How would you support students?
So there's a few different ways of supporting students. So first of all, there is holding drop-in sessions. There's having the appropriate counsellors for victims of racial attacks. And also there's increasing awareness of racial diversity, which is absolutely something that needs to be done, as George was saying earlier, like across the board. You can't just raise awareness of one race. It needs to be complete. Bringing everyone together is how you do it. And right now we need to show unity. We need to show solidarity as a student body, regardless of race, gender, or income. Like, we all need to be coming together and kind of celebrating the fact that, you know, we're all here, like, despite everything that's happened, in a way, if that makes sense. I'm sorry. I know I sound like I'm rambling a bit now, but we need that pastoral support. We need that kind of celebration of equality, and we also need to make sure that the uni is held accountable to the standards of equality, and we need to consult with different societies to make sure that they feel that the university is doing all it can to kind of promote equality and target racism in these difficult times.
Thank you. So back to you, Georgia. Do you think that the university's response to these racist incidents has been sufficient, and what would you do to support the victims?
With regards to the racism on campus, I think the most important thing is to work, I'm a white person, working specifically with the BAME groups and the BAME officer to make sure that they're constantly feeding into everything I'm doing. There is, I think acting without experience when it comes to minority issues is often quite a dangerous thing, so I think to work closely with those groups. I did work with Stand Up to Racism with their motion at Christmas time to implement the hate crime review as well. I would continue to work with groups like that as well. I would want the campus to more widely support the gatherings that we've been having against racism on campus. And also one of my manifesto points is to introduce information about hate crime and hate crime reporting into inductions. So how to report to the union, the university, the police, and the effects that hate crime has on people. I think a lot of the time people think it's funny to say inappropriate comments and make people feel uncomfortable, and a lot of the time it's genuinely affecting people, and I think we need to hammer in the effects that these things are having on real human beings rather than, do you know what I mean, trying to enforce, like I want these people removed and there needs to be zero tolerance, but we also just need to try and handle it before it even happens, I think.
That's great, thank you. So that's brought our questions to an end. So before we go to the audience questions, would you both like to do 45 seconds to 1 minute summarising your view? So Alice, do you want to start us off?
Absolutely. There's been some absolutely brilliant points raised, and I'm really impressed by everyone's manifestos and commitments to this. But I do pledge that I will make a difference. I'm not here to enforce the status quo. I'm here to change a system that is inherently wrong. It's flawed. There are so many problems with it. It is disgusting that intolerance is allowed to kind of run rampant on our campus. It is disgusting that sexual assault is kind of met with indifference by the university, and I pledge to change that, to make a difference, and I pledge that no one should ever have to kind of drop out of uni or hide because of problems with addiction and alcohol issues, and that students shouldn't be hospitalized or even die on occasions because of lack of access to drugs testing kits or drugs counselling or
Thank you, Alice. That's cut you there. Sorry. And Georgia, what about you?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for listening to me. I also want to thank my fellow candidates for taking all of this stuff really seriously. And it is true, like there's a culture that needs to be changed here on our campus. I want to close by saying, ultimately, I have provided support for and advocated for a large range of students over the last 4 years. And there's nothing I would love more than to spend the next year doing it in a position where I have the power to actually push for the things that people have been telling me about for the last 4 years. I want to implement and push the uni to implement improvements to wellbeing provisions, improved inductions with more information that students actually need, welfare training for the tutors, as well as campaigning on a range of issues, including things you guys want to see. I want to run events that bring students together, like the International Film and Food Festival. I want to celebrate our campus diversity. And finally, I want to represent you guys, and I want your voice to feel heard. This is our campus, and every voice is important, not just those who get these roles, not just those in power, and I want you guys to feel that. Thanks.
That's great, thank you. So we're now going to open for any audience questions that you may have. Yeah. I think just speak loudly.
So welfare and equality issues affect all students in different ways that might link to the roles of other officers. How would you collaborate with the other officers to improve welfare across things like activities and sport? That's for both of you.
One of the things that I'll take the sport angle and then I'll go for activities. From the sport angle, I think one of the key things that's really problematic is with the memberships being yearly, if you have a disability, if you're not sure how accessible a sport is, if you don't even know if you're going to engage with that club, I think that's a huge financial dedication to us students to involve in. I think also looking at the welfare training that both the societies and sports welfare officers get. And consulting continually with the PTOs and societies. Like, I can't hammer this home enough. Like, I have run societies for far too long and felt like nobody asked me when they should have. And I think it's a general problem on our campus is that we're not referring to experience. And I think experience is incredibly important on these issues, especially where I may not have that experience. For example, I've had to advocate for students with mobility issues in sport. I currently do not have issues with mobility. I have hypermobility, but I do not have a specific mobility issue. And that has meant that I've continually referred to other students and asked for their advice and their input on these issues. I think that's key.
Thank you. And Alice, what is your opinion on this?
Okay, so one of the main things which can really deter people from societies, or if they join a society, they experience it, and it really kind of mars their ability to get back involved, is things like not feeling comfortable in a society. And this can come from all sorts of places, from like what people perceive as almost harmless racist jokes to sexual assault cases, and these absolutely need to be tackled. The student body needs to know that we will be taking this seriously, and I promise to work tirelessly with all the PTOs and activities officers and athletic union officers to absolutely make sure everyone feels included, no one feels discriminated against, and no one feels unsafe. No one should feel unsafe in a society where it's a place where we're supposed to be able to express how we feel and like get together with like-minded people. And it's something that we really need to not just talk to the officers, but also talk to society members. Try constantly be like, I know that they get really annoying, but constantly handing out surveys and stuff, trying to find what might have deterred you from this society. What is it about the societies in general that are kind of creating these problems, and how can we tackle it? Absolutely, we need to be asking the student body these questions and seeing what are the problems and what can we do.
Great. And do we have any more audience questions?
I'll let you go first this one.
Hi, yes, this is on my manifesto. Thank you so much. So, students in financial hardship obviously face so many issues at university. So, first of all, there is like a kind of bit of snobbery around Newcastle. It's like the raw university, and oftentimes, especially if you've read some New First posts, there is a lot of discrimination against students from like lower socio-economic backgrounds. And first of all, we need to raise awareness. We need to absolutely be combating the stigma about this. Sorry, that's my thing, fighting stigma. But also, we need to be working with students going through financial hardship on things like how to like use a food bank. It can be a really difficult process, and there is a lot of stigma about it again. And the process itself can be quite difficult. People don't know where to turn for that, and also advice for students on living on a budget, and which like can be a really difficult thing when you're not really planning like ahead, and you can just end up having one too many pints and then suddenly not being able to afford to pay rent. And that's something a lot of students from like higher income families don't have to think about, but it's like a very difficult thing. And there are like information on it, so absolutely we need to like raise awareness of things like the emergency loan. I think it's an emergency interest free loan that the university can offer. We need to raise awareness of things like that, and also kind of help students who need to apply for this kind of thing navigate through it. And that is a massive thing, navigating through it. And my final point on this is more psychological support as well, access to counselling specifically for like the emotional distress that being in financial difficulty can cause you, and also be struggling financially as a legitimate reason to submit a PEC form. I know personally that when I don't know how I'm going to pay my next rent check, when I don't know how I'm going to get food on the table, I do not really give one about the assignments that I've got coming on, and I'm more interested in not becoming homeless.
Thank you. And what do you have to say on this, Georgia?
With regards to working class students, I think it's really crucial that we finally push through that PTO that everybody has wanted for ages. It's been 4 years, I think, since the last motion to implement a working class PTO, and I think it is massively needed. I think the student voice needs to be heard on this issue, not just SABs who may not know what the lived experience is like. I think ultimately financial hardship is something that is incredibly real to students on campus, especially those who come from working class backgrounds and can't just ring home. I think we need to have less scrutiny that goes on with the access to the financial support as well. I think it can be quite demoralising for people to have to hand over 6 months, I think it is, of bank statements in order to access it. I think there needs to be more support specifically targeted at people who have like financial distress. There needs to be workshops around this. I think in general consulting directly with students and holding open forums and focus groups as well to also just engage with students continually on these issues. I think too often we group together too many groups into one focus group, because I went to one last year for working class students, mature students and disabled students, and we were all at the same table. And like as much as we all wanted to talk about the injustice that happens here, we had different issues. And I think there needs to be individual sessions to bring these issues to light better.
That's great, thank you. I think we've got time for one more quick question, if anybody's got one.
PTO, part-time officer.
Oh my god.
Like a liberation officer. Like me. No, that's okay.
Okay, maybe one more then.
Okay, so welfare and equality obviously covers quite a few different groups of people that you guys might not be necessarily part of. So, for example, BAME or the trans community, things like that. And I think it was Georgia said earlier, you can't really just go into this sort of blindly and just be like, oh, well, you know, I don't know anything about it, but I want to help kind of thing. So I was just wondering what experience both of you had in terms of, you know, doing things towards minorities that you might not necessarily be a part of and sort of helping them out. And I don't know if you can answer this, I don't mind.
Do you mind?
Go for it.
I have sought out specifically BME women's training and sexual harassment for my society because I think this is something that is incredibly important. Like, I have worked with Stand Up to Racism, and I would continually want to grow on my knowledge. Like, I have continually sought training that I'm not paid to get or expected to get over and over to try and make sure I'm more aware on these issues. I've engaged with groups across the UK through my work in the national network I run, with groups that have different interest issues to me, and I think continually, like I said, always consulting with those who know and seeking out the training and education for myself as and when I can, as much as I can, is 100% part of who I am and have been for the last 4 years.
Thank you. And Alice?
Absolutely. I think it's always arrogant and kind of like white privilege almost to assume that we can truly understand the struggles of groups that we're not in, which is why we constantly need to be consulting with people with more expertise of us. We need to be absolutely open-minded and prepared to accept things that we're even doing ourselves, and constantly looking to better ourselves, constantly looking for flaws in the system. And that's something it can be very difficult to do from a lens that you're not yourself seeing through. Like, as an LGBT plus person, like, I see all the time things like various aspects of like biphobia that many like straight people don't. And absolutely, I can imagine that, like, for like BAME women, for example, see like a lot more prejudices directed towards them that I absolutely don't notice. And absolutely, that's why we need to constantly consult with other people on this type of thing. So we need to work with the other liberation officers. We need to be working with societies to see what the problems are and how we can best help. And asking what the issues are, how do we highlight the problems, how do we find solutions to these. And absolutely, it is always arrogant of us to assume that we know what the issues are. It's not for us to do that. It's for us to kind of look at the issues as they are presented to us and implement solutions.
That's great, thank you. So that brings the debate to an end. Thank you to the audience for your questions, and thank you to Georgia and Alice for being here.
Thanks.
No.
I'm answering a question. Now I'm not.
Okay, so hello and welcome to the editor of the Courier debate. I'm just gonna walk through how it's gonna work very briefly. You're gonna have 45 seconds for an opening statement. You're gonna have 45 seconds at the end of the debate for a closing statement. You're gonna have 1 minute to answer the questions. Feel free to jump in after each candidate has answered to sort of create debate, which is what we want. Audience can send questions in through the hashtag NUSU debate.
Debates 2020.
Yeah, that's it. So without further ado, we're gonna start with the first section, which is the new sections that some of you want to. Sorry. Oh yeah, the 45 seconds. Sorry. Joe, want to start?
Yes, I get to go first? Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Joe Holleran, and like all 6 of us here, I'm running to be editor of the Courier this year. I have been writing for the paper for the last 4 years. My first article coming out in the Halloween 2016 edition. I am currently a master's journalism student here at Newcastle University. I did my undergrad here as well in history, media and film. My manifesto outlines 5 key points, but my main 2 that I'm going to say to you today are to have increased representation in the actual paper itself by introducing an international news page and a Your Voices page for student representation. We have over 5,000 foreign students at the university, and we have students who are neurodiverse, students who are LGBTQA+, and this will give them the representation that they need in the paper. And so I seem to be a little bit short on my time, but that is those are my main points. If you'd like to read the full manifesto, it is available on my Facebook page. So, thank you.
Thank you. Rory?
Hello, I'm Rory, a third-year journalism and media student and sport editor at the Courier. From my experience representing all 3 strands of student media, I've seen some amazing growth that has emerged. Nights such as tonight, hosted by the amazing teams at NUTV and NSR, simply did not happen until 2 years ago, when I proudly was part of the first team to ever host debates. Little did I know that I'd be standing here 2 years on. As editor, we will aim to create a career and student media brand that continues to excel and produce as much content as possible for all students. This, whilst at the same time endeavouring to look for forward-thinking ideas to create a career that is reachable for everybody. Thank you.
Okay, Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a third-year English Lit student and a current news editor. Before I was an editor, I won Article of the Year in last year's Media Awards, which I was very proud of. My aims for student media are just to improve engagement across campus. I want it to be a part of everyone's lives. Main ways of doing that are distribution in halls, I want NSR played in appropriate cafes on campus. I want to use the Courier's greatest social media platform to promote NSR and NUTV and advertise them all much more widely on campus using TVs and posters. I want to make it more inclusive with better socials with writers and workshops for them advertised really well at the start of each term. And in terms of content, I want to introduce coupons and I want to introduce New Societies column. I've got the experience, the policies and the personality to bring everyone together and hopefully make the Courier the best it's ever been.
Thank you. Molly?
Hi, I'm Molly Greaves. I'm the current deputy editor and a former news editor. I have my own radio show called Bangers and Trash, and I co-host the Courier news show Hot Off the Press. I believe that I have the experience, the enthusiasm, the drive to be your next editor. For the Courier to become the independent voice of Newcastle students, as our slogan states, we need to be conducting journalism that serves the student body. While a lot of us love being here, things like the university spending, waiting times for counselling and lack of diversity are still an issue, and my 3 years in student media have taught me that these things can be changed when we speak up. The Courier has been launching journalism careers for decades, and I want to continue this with more talks and workshops from our successful alumni. But the paper shouldn't just be for writers, and I want to showcase the talents of artists and social media managers so that a wider range of people can benefit from our paper. Thank you for listening, and I hope you choose to vote for me for number 1.
Ella?
Hi, I'm Ella, a third-year English student and senior culture editor of the Courier. I really care about this paper. After 3 years of heavy involvement, I think the Courier needs someone creative with an eye for design, experience in all forms of media, and a flair for innovation to make this paper relevant uni-wide. I know how to make a paper that people want to read. I want to make it fun and engaging, improving blind date in a new relationship section, and introducing a section for comments from the readers. I want to make it look even more gorgeous with a pull-out culture section, not be afraid of to talk about controversial topics, and have a paper that represents the experiences, ideas, and talents of everyone. I overhauled the lifestyle section last year and it won section of the year under my leadership. I'm looking forward to going more into detail about how I want to spread that throughout the paper. I'm really proud of the Courier, and that's something I think is worth sharing.
Okay, great, thank you. Rebecca, go.
Last but not least, hi, my name is Rebecca Johnson. I'm a third-year history student. I'm running to be your next editor of the Courier. I've been involved with the paper since my first year of university, starting as a writer, then becoming a sports editor in my second year, and I won sub-editor of the year that year. I'm currently head of sport for the Courier this year. I've been involved in all strands of student media during my time. I've commentated on Fight Night, appeared on that. I've got my own radio show this year with the lovely Jo Smith. I want to become editor of the Courier so I can offer students a fantastic student media experience. Student media is something that should be celebrated across campus, and I want to make that happen. I want more online content, more investigative journalism, more cross-collaboration with our other branches, more sports and societies coverage, and better marketing for the paper. So please vote for me number 1.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to change the timing, but we're going to go to the first section, which is... I'm going to start with Molly and Ella, who have talked about adding more puzzles to the paper. More specifically, Molly, you mentioned doing a double page of spread in the is that going to be adding more pages to the Courier, or are you going to take a page off one of the sections?
The thing is about trying to sort out pages for the Courier is, as most of us on the team know, you can't really... We don't decide what sections have single pages and double pages based on like what we think is the most important. For example, beauty this year is fantastic. We only have 1 page for beauty because of the amount of sub-editors we had signing up. So it usually turns out that the pages vary, the sections vary in length every year. So I couldn't really say for a fact whether I'd make the paper longer or take it from another section. I wouldn't say it's one of my main policies, but I do think it'd be good to have more puzzles because it's something that gets people picking up the physical paper as opposed to just reading it online. So I would definitely want to incorporate that somehow.
You want to add more puzzles as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd second that about the pages. I think it's important to be flexible with them and base it on year by year. I do think the puzzles are an important thing, and I know it doesn't sound like a kind of very important policy, but I think they got rid of them in 2012 and there was an uproar, I've heard. So I think it's important to keep them and expand them because it's something it is something that gets people picking up the paper, and I think that's really important because we put so much work into the rest of it that once you've got it, that's one of my main pushes in the campaign.
Thank you. Jo, you have a similar question for you for the international news page. Do you plan on adding a page or taking something off?
At the moment, the plan is to either add a page if we can get enough current affairs applicants for comment and news, but if necessary, to take away one of the news pages and dedicate it entirely to international news, which will alter week by week based on story demand, whatever events are going on, but also by encouraging students to come forward from these places who have a story going on and that affects their family back home or whatever, and they want to share that story. So at the minute, that is the plan, is to hopefully add a page, maybe but perhaps to take a page away from news and replace it with international news.
What would be your criteria on the time of choosing the stories?
Well, obviously, it will be judged by a mixture of our own opinions, because that's, article ideas are set by sub-editors' opinions at the end of the day, but also because we're not from those countries, this is more about engaging online on social media with international students and hearing about what stories they want told. This doesn't have to be a one-off event. This doesn't have to be an earthquake in one country, the effect of coronavirus. This can be an ongoing thing that happened that's about the state of the government in that country. And this ties into kind of investigative journalism, but not limited to our surroundings here at Newcastle University, but around the world. Because students are here from around the world, so why should our investigative and why should our paper not reflect not only what they experience here, but what they experience back home as well?
Okay, that is perfect to move to the next question, which is you, Molly and you, Jo, both mentioned adding personal essays and personal columns of stories. Why and how are you gonna do this, Molly, if you wanna go first?
Yeah, so my idea was to incorporate personal essays into lifestyle. Lifestyle at the moment is a great section of paper, like Ella said. It won section of the year last year. It's a great section still this year. The problem that they face quite often is that anything can be considered lifestyle. So since we've got a food section, which again, it's really great and I'd keep it, but since we've got a food section, for example, lifestyle can't really now cover anything about food. So their options quite limited. I think that personal essays would fill some space, allow writers to write longer form pieces. It would allow writers to incorporate their own ideas instead of just what we tell them, which is sort of how it works now. And in the real world, when you freelance, you have to pitch your own ideas. So I think that's something that's very important. It also will touch on, personal essays tend to touch on mental health, sex, relationships, all stuff that's very much a part of what makes the lifestyle section great. And a lot of Courier sub-editors have written personal essays, whether this is for their
Sorry,
personal...
Molly, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Can I just mention something about that? I did, when I was lifestyle editor, I introduced a section a bit similar to that called Humans of Newcastle. And it was hard to get people to... We always had it as like a constant thing every week, and it was hard to get people to choose to take it up without saying something specific. I think sometimes writers are quite wary about pitching their own articles, and I definitely agree that that's something that should be encouraged, but I wonder how we could go about that if that was like in the personal essay.
I mean, there could be something specific. It could be one week we say, would someone like to share an experience about mental health? Would someone like to share an LGBT experience? I see what you're saying there, and there is a way that it could be specific while still having writers have their own ideas. It's something that's starting to happen more. We had a personal essay written in Lifestyle recently. His name escapes me, but it was really good. And I think it's something I'd definitely like to incorporate.
Joe?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said in terms of the types of things we would cover. My difference would be that it would be moved to comment rather than lifestyle. And it would be themed. We talk about encouraging writers to come forward with their stories. Would be themed around an issue, sort of themed around LGBT issues, themed around physical or neurodiversity, and hopefully this would encourage. We could build this. We could advertise this one week and then have it build over a few weeks. Writers submit their articles and then have it published over 2 pages in the comment section. At the minute we have something called Campus Comment, which is really good, which I think Molly actually introduced this year, which is brilliant. So in many ways it would actually be an extension of that. But in my version it's called a Your Voice page. But the only difference from what's been said is to try and encourage more debate in terms of political issues in this section. So
Joe, I'm gonna
yes,
have to.
that's fine.
Okay, so other than that, Rebecca and Amy, sorry. You both mentioned you want to add more societies and more sport. Rory, you mentioned that as well in your manifesto. What did you expect to achieve by adding more societies? Rebecca, if you want to go first.
I think from my experience working as a sport editor, a lot of sports teams really like coverage and they're really, really grateful for coverage. And it encourages a lot of teams to pick it up. Like recently I covered a netball report and they won and all of their team picked it up. They clicked on the Courier. And I think by doing that, it not just... You've sort of got your thing why you've picked it up, but then there's other bits as well. People flicking through the newspaper and go, actually, I'm interested in that, and it gets more readership. And I think with societies as well, having a platform for a society to come every week and say, right, we're maybe hosting this week, or we've got this event coming on. And again, it's just getting more people involved and having more of a community across the university.
Rory?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Becca said. And I think as editor, it is their duty to make sure that people are aware of what is going on our campus. And therefore, having good accessibility and good rapport with your sports clubs and societies is really key in order for as many people as possible to know what's going on.
Amy?
Yeah, like obviously the sports section is such a major part of the paper, and I think it's so unfair almost that societies don't get the same opportunity. I've been in a cappella since first year, and as an editor I was able to like advertise their achievements and shows, and it was kind of biased, therefore, that other societies didn't get that. And we get certain societies emailing us as news editors saying they've got this thing on. And often we've already laid up and we can't fit it in. But I'm always like, as a student newspaper, we need to advertise our student activities. So if we had a designated little section every week about it, I'd picture it laid up like album reviews where you'd have a picture of the society. What have they done? What's so exciting about it? And it would change each week depending on who like had something going on, and all the societies would be aware that we're there to advertise that, so they'd be more likely to come to us, and we wouldn't have to advertise it like, please, anyone have got anything going on? It's just important to have a base for activities as well.
Then how do you, prevent the whole paper from turning into a massive society's advert?
Because it'd be like a set bit, like we kind of struggle coming up with news that's interesting for 4 pages. So I'd make literally half of page 6, always the same amount of space. If there's not enough news going on, we use a bigger picture for the society, but like a special bit. And if there's too many societies messaging us at once, we'd have to be not brutal, but narrow it down the amount of information we could say for each one. I don't think we'd ever make the whole paper about societies. We'd be sensible about it.
Okay. On that, you talk about having more presence of the societies just so people know what's going on campus. I don't know if you're aware, all of you, that NUTV has a show specifically for that called Spotlight. So how do you expect to make this different from the NUTV show?
Can I come in? Sorry, can I come in on that? In terms of the dedicated society page, this is what I would think is a good example of where NUTV and the Courier can come together and have a cover on from both angles, so you can have a camera crew go along, film the society for a whole week, follow their, if it's a dance society, follow their training, and then follow their performance over multiple issues if necessary. But I think the idea of a dedicated society page is something that a few of us have believe would be a good idea, because we do have societies who feel like they are not covered in the paper. But again, I think this would be a good area for cross-media collaboration.
Can I follow up with that? I completely agree with what Joe has said, and then add to that there's just so much opportunity already there. We have a fantastic website with articles refreshed weekly, and the opportunities there. We've got fantastic equipment, fantastic team of NUTV. Why not take cameras along to everything? On our online articles, make sure that we have videos for each article that's to do with campus events and what's going on.
Can I chip in there, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, it links into my point as well about more collaboration. I've got to agree with Joe and Rory. Wherever there's a societal event, why can't you take along a camera, take along a microphone, have NUTV and NSR there, because they're both fantastic branches and they do need to be used. And I think that it's a good opportunity to get other people involved, so maybe people from NUTV take an interest and want to write something up for the Courier, or someone from the Courier wants to have a go filming or whatever. So I think that's the perfect opportunity for all branches to really work together, but also to get involved with a branch that they may not feel comfortable in. That's something which happened to me. I had no experience with NUTV or NSR, and it just so happened that I was at an event where I got flung on the radio, and it did absolute wonders for me. So I think that that's something that could really, really bring us a lot closer together to produce some really good content.
Thank you. Amy, you.
Yeah. I was going to say, I did know that show existed, but I didn't know any NUTV shows existed until near the end of second year, to be honest, which is why I think it's so important that we advertise, especially through the Courier's social media, because I know that's where we get a lot of our readers. So we should advertise that NUTV show, make it clear across campus that it happens, so that people don't just go, obviously print's important, but if those things are going on that's so great but no one knows about them, then what's the point? We need to advertise it and make the societies watch those shows, know they can go on them, because I don't think that many people actually do.
Okay. Molly, you look like you wanted to say something. I don't know if you have. Okay. On what you just said, Amy, you talk about using the Courier social media to advertise NSR and NUTV. And while it is true that the Courier has more followers in some of the social media, don't you think that using the Courier, just the Courier's social media, would further the idea that NSR and NUTV is just part of the Courier instead of their own organizations?
No, not at all. I think they'd still be separate organisations, but why would we not utilise the extra engagement that the Courier Facebook page has? Say, look at our other social media account of student media account of Newcastle, it wouldn't be our younger sister, it would be our partners, but just using the extra audience that the Courier social medias all have. They wouldn't be combined into one as in underneath the Courier. We'd just be giving them a helping hand, which is fair enough.
Would you have any other plans to promote NSR and NUTV outside using the Courier?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, I'd love NSR to be played somewhere around campus. Like, it's such a shame that we have such a good station that, as far as I'm aware, isn't really played in any of the outlets. I know the student union bar probably wouldn't because they have their own thing going on, but I don't see why we couldn't in the more relaxed eat cafe facilities. I originally wanted to have clips of like subtitled NUTV on the TV shows, but then I realised we don't subtitle them as such, and whether the TVs, like, people would be able to stop and stare. But that would be something I'd be willing to like talk to NUTV about. Like, is there ways of getting NUTV and NSR around the campus for people to like walk past and see rather than have to search it out for themselves? Because students are lazy and they kind of need it to be there to like look at like, oh, that thing exists. Because I'm aware, like, I'm so engaged in media, but I didn't know NUTV existed in first year. I did know NSR, but I didn't know how to find it, didn't know how to get my own show, ect. So just make it everywhere.
Okay.
Can I jump in quickly there on NSR promotion? I'm not sure how feasible this is, and it's not something that's in my manifesto, but it's something I've been throwing around the last couple of days with people, is an app for NSR and an app for NUTV. Because different media are engaged with in different ways. You walk around the uni, you pick up the Courier. There's no way, unless you know about it, there's no way you're going to know about NUTV or NSR. It's kind of hidden away. If we can have an app that is promoted through the Courier's social media, that people just download on their phone, then they can listen to the NSR shows as podcasts. They can watch NUTV shows as... sorry.
Are you saying ad or app?
App, sorry.
App, like app.
Application, yeah.
Okay.
On mobile. Again, this is not something that... I'm not a tech kind of guy, so it would have to be in collaboration with people who know what they're doing more than me. But I think just in terms of different media, NSR and NUTV and the Courier are so different that to kind of advertise one through the other kind of seems counterproductive to me.
Can I?
Yeah.
I think the thing with the app idea is that though it's an appealing idea to obviously have a more usable place for us to read it was on Rory's manifesto, to read the Courier and to listen to NSR and NUTV, I don't feel like people are more likely to download an app than they are to just go to the website in particular. I know that, veering on to the Courier a little bit more, I know that our website is hard to read on your phone, and that is an issue that we need to address, but I think people are more likely to see our content and NSR and NUTV's content if it's more embedded into their social media patterns rather than people don't tend to just log on to nsr.com or log on to the courier.com unless they already know about us. I think we need to engage it more through social media and then look at other ways we can make it more usable, because I don't know how much an app, I just feel like it would take up a lot of our budget and a lot of our time, and I don't know how many people would realistically download it.
Can I
Yes.
Can I jump in? This is going to happen. So the one thing I want to make crystal clear is that this is purely a feasibility study for a mobile app for the Courier. It's not for NUTV and NSR. And the idea behind it is, am I guaranteeing as editor that I could produce an app in a year? Absolutely not. I can't guarantee that. It could happen, it could not. I simply don't know. I don't have a crystal ball and I can't predict that. What I can say is, though, that we need to realise that we're living in a generation now where the demographic of our age group look at news online on their phones and aren't picking up as many newspapers. And we have to realise that we need to adapt to this. And that's where the feasibility study of an app comes into play. I was just distributing yesterday, in fact, around campus. And the one thing I did notice, I hate to see it, is that there were an awful lot of newspapers left in common rooms from previous weeks that hadn't been picked up. That's something that really hurts me, because I care so much about this newspaper and I want to see people reading it.
Sorry.
You're gonna,
yeah.
Okay, no worries, let's bring it up later.
Could I quickly? Or
Yes.
I totally agree with you. I think as much as I'd love to walk around campus and see everyone reading the physical paper, I think it's naive. You can't even see people reading. You don't usually even see people reading the physical national paper, so how are we meant to expect people to read the physical copy of the Courier? I mean, some people do, but I just think a Courier-specific app, and I know you're not promising it, and thanks for not making false promises like a lot of people do sometimes. But I think people are way less likely to download an app for one thing. I've actually been looking into the feasibility of getting the Courier on the Apple News app, which a lot of people have. I think it's automatic on your phone, and it is entirely possible that we could use that, and it would be pretty quick and pretty easy. And then when people open our links, instead of going to our website where you can't read anything on the phone, it would go to the app, and I think that would solve a lot of problems without the need for like long extensive studies into feasibility and bringing a lot of other people in to look at apps. And yeah.
Thank you. Rebecca, online is one of your main points in your manifesto. Do you want to chip in something?
Yeah, definitely. So online is, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and Tom's done a brilliant job here. But I think one of the issues that we've had this year is, although my team are absolutely fantastic, but it's happened across the paper that articles haven't been going up on time, and we haven't had a lot of online exclusives. So for me, I think a bigger online presence is needed, which would lead to the reintroduction of online editors, but not for each section. Just have an overview, so one for current affairs, one for culture, one for life and style, and one for sport. But as well as being responsible for online, they would also be responsible for social media, because it's been mentioned by these guys just now that social media is such a big part of all of our lives, and to make sure that we have articles that look visibly nice but are also we're able to read them and they come up is really important. I think Twitter's a really big platform that we can use this. We've been using this a lot more this semester, but I think that's where we get our main news from. Sorry.
Can I say something about the website?
Yeah.
I think I would agree about the app. I think like there's so much that I want to do. I don't know about you guys. I mean, I know about you guys. We all want to do a lot. There's so much that I want to do, and I think having an app would be not like, I think it's worth putting the energy into the website that we've already got, working on, like Molly said, having it made more easy to read on a phone and more compatible with like different phone screens and things like that. And then you can have stuff like links from the social media to the app, and then have things like NSR and NETV links. I definitely think, I just want to, like, not the app, sorry, the website. I think, that's what I've done.
I respond to that, if that's okay. Yeah. I completely agree with Ella there. And I think that is an important part, because it was talked about before how NUTV and NSR would be able to get out there, and that they are obviously really important. They've got their own marketing team, like Vicky, James and Lorna over the last couple of years have done absolutely superbly to get the presence. I mean, we can see the little logos on our microphones. But I think as well on the Courier website to sort of have more integration, so to have NSR and NUTV links that work really well, and for them to have the same thing. And I think to make our website more pleasing and have those down the side would be very useful.
One of the things you mentioned in your manifesto, Rebecca, about the collaboration with NSR specifically is adding a news and entertainment show, but NSR already has its own news and entertainment show, and the Courier has Hot Off the Press. So what do you want to bring into the table that it's new?
Yeah, so I think here this is really a chance for everyone to work together, because I know that the Courier's got their own news section, NUTV have got their own news section, NSR, you guys have got your news show. And I think that Hot Off the Press, correct me if I'm wrong, Molly, is more to do with what's in the paper. But I think if we have like a news show or an entertainment show, it could be a chance for people who wouldn't get the chance to meet together. I know that doesn't make sense, but it will in a second. So what I'd like to do is, so say for example, someone from the Courier has a news story, they go out and research it, they then work with NSR, who then maybe present it, and then NUTV film it, and then NUTV put it on their YouTube. So you've got 3 different branches and potentially 3 or 4 different people who may not have met before working together to produce a brand new show. And I think that it would be quite good for both NSR and the Courier to have that sort of report between each other and keep in contact with each other. You're about to shut me off.
Sorry. But then your solution is just the same thing as we have right now, but actually make people go into NSR news, head of news or head of entertainment to participate.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that's completely, fair. I think that, having, it's just about working together really. And that's something that is really, really a big part of what I'm about. But I think it's more so to do with making sure that we produce. So say, for example, you're head of news for NSR, yes? If you find a story and you do it on the news show, that's fine, but then the Courier might not know about it and NUTV might not know about it. So it's about making sure that we're all on the same platform. And I mean, it doesn't have to be, regular. It could be a weekly thing, a monthly thing, whatever. Just to be able to work with different people, I think, is the key part, and make sure we're all on the same platform.
Could I just jump in on that point? A couple of years ago, we tried to kind of have this collaboration between NUTV and the Courier for a thing called Toon Vision, which a couple of episodes ran. This was back when Harris was kind of leading NUTV. And the biggest issue we had, I filmed a few pilots for that, the biggest issue we had was commitment to a solid idea and a kind of flagship show. We disagreed over what it could be. In my manifesto, it's called The Courier Show. We've had different iterations of it up here. But I think we need that. We need a solid show that we can all, that NUTV and the Courier and NSR, the news teams, particularly of these shows, can come together and have, okay, every Friday we're going to put out this show. It might not be the most polished thing in the world, but it's something we can build on for the future. It's something that is a cornerstone of collaboration between the three medias going forward. So that would be one of my main objectives over the year, would be to launch this show and have it become something we can be proud of.
Can I jump in there if that's okay?
Molly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the subject of obviously collaboration and news and hot off the press, I would definitely want to next year make sure that there's a chat, so there is more communication between all the three branches of media, especially like to do with news. Like Alex wrote an amazing front cover piece for us this year, and we wouldn't have had that information or that story without, sorry, not just flattering you, we wouldn't have had that information or that story without her coming directly to us. I think if we had more line of communication, that would be a lot better. I would also I've loved co-hosting Hot Off the Press with Grace this year. It's been absolutely fantastic. If I were to do it again, we have had guests and things, I would want it so that anyone could come on it, whether it was from the Courier, NSR, and UTV, just so that different people could meet and people could have the same chances that me and Grace have had this year, because we'd never been on the radio before. I would want to make it less mine and Grace's show and more a student media show if I was to do it again, which I'd like to next year.
Rory, anything to add?
I think the collaboration that we already have between all three strands of student media is really, really strong, and it already flourishes. And I think it's something you have to be very careful with, because it's there already in place and you don't want to exhaust it too much. At the end of the day, these are three separate entities. They have their own drives, their own ambitions. Of course, we can feed off one another and learn from one another, but you want them to have their own identity at the same time. And I, of course, want cross-collaboration, but at the same time, very wary that there are members within each student media branch that have their own kind of aims for the year.
And this goes back to the promotion point of the Courier being the big daddy to NUTV and NSR, and then not having their own identities. That's the only issue. Going back to the question a few questions ago about links on the Courier website, that's the only issue I'd have with that and it would detract NUTV and NSR of their own identity, which is what we're trying to build.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
So the idea behind that was to have links, NSR and NUTV, on our website, but for also NSR to have links to the Courier and NUTV on their website, and NUTV to have links to the Courier and NSR on their website. So again, it's not just the Courier being like this high and mighty presence, it's everyone on an equal platform. I think that's something that I'm trying to get across with the idea for a news and an entertainment show. So we're all on an equal platform, we've all got the same information, and we're all able to produce some really, really good content for our respective branches.
Can I add something to that? I think that's a really valid point, and I think that's something that at the start of my time at uni was prevalent and very much the case. But examples like things like tonight, 2-3 years ago, just didn't happen. Things like Fight Night as well didn't happen. But the likes of NUTV and NSR have really come and flourished and providing this amazing content to the extent where I think it's a really outdated thing to think that the Courier is so above NSR and NUTV. I think the three of them stand proud, collaborating with one another, but at the same time are able to produce their own content and do it really well.
Can I?
Yeah.
Really quick. Yeah, and I completely agree with that, and that's why I didn't have too much extensively in my manifesto about NSR and NUTV, just because as much as I've done things for both branches and I've really loved it, I don't think it's my place to say this is what NSR and NUTV are doing next year, because we are separate. I think collaboration is great, and like I said, I'd love to, especially in regards to news, because finding news is so hard, and it's not like we'd be sharing like creative property, we'd just be sharing what's happened. I think communication and stuff like that is great. I don't think we necessarily need to become one and need to merge identities, because I think all three branches of media have such strong identities on their own, and I wouldn't want to change that.
Yeah, so just going back to what you've said, so I noticed that, Rebecca, on your manifesto you mentioned for Freshers' Fair having leaflets representing all three branches of student media together, whereas Rory, you suggested having separate tables at Freshers' Fair for all three branches of student media. You all clearly have a lot of ideas for NSR and NUTV. How do you think you'll work alongside the incoming station managers, who will have their own distinct ideas as well, without encroaching on their identity and their ideas?
Can I jump in? I think, forgive me, future NSR and NUTV station managers, if I'm wrong, but I feel like they're going to want to boost themselves as much as possible. And I think it's a simple ask for an extra table. For the last three Freshers' Fairs, Refreshers' Fairs that I've been part of, we've only been given two, and a lot of the time we've kind of been shoehorned in at the end. And that, for me, just isn't good enough. And when it's a case, I know that it's something that would have to be referred to the activities officer, but it's a simple ask. I don't think it's a big ask just for an extra table, just to give us our own distinction of who we are.
Can I? Yeah. So the idea behind that was I spoke to people from NSR and a couple of people from NUTV, and I got a general positive response about that. Because I know NSR do their table outside the SU during Freshers Week, and that's something that's really, really good. But we put couriers there and stuff like that, and people are just generally interested about student media. You know, people pick up a leaflet for NSR and be like, well, where can I find ones for the Courier or NUTV? And I think if we had all the information on one place, obviously I don't know how it works specifically, but to have, emails and things like that. So then even if you're picking up for NSR, you've still got, I can get involved with the Courier, I can get involved with NUTV, and I think that applies to anyone. And I think as well the important thing is we use a lot of paper on leaflets, and cutting down on the amount of paper used is something that, is very, very topical at the moment. And I think just by doing that, it's just more effective for student media.
Ella, you on the other hand have not mentioned NSR or NUTV at all. Why is that?
Well, it's not because I don't care about them or something. It's actually the opposite. It wasn't like I wasn't thinking about it. I just sort of see it as a given, as the role of the person who oversees all three. I didn't need to mention that those would be on my radar. I completely agree with some of the things that we mentioned. So yeah, I do have plans to add NSR and NUTV links to the website. I've had my own radio show. Charlotte and I started a culture show just this semester called Culture Shock, that was trying to collaborate the culture sections onto the radio. But yeah, I do agree with leaving their own identity. I don't want it impinged too much on the station managers themselves, because like I said, like others have said, I think it's important that they will, I think it's good that we back each other up and publicise each other. And I think at Freshers' Fairs, having us all together, not with two tables, hopefully with three, but next to each other, saying this is student media, these are its three branches. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Joe, one question for you. You talk about and you mentioned before about podcast and turning NSR into podcasts focused. What do you mean about this? Because each show has a producer that decides whether or not they want to publish their shows as a podcast. That's why they're recorded and uploaded to a common website. So I don't...
Yeah, this comes back mainly to, in terms of getting more people to listen to NSR. Whenever I speak to people on this, going around talking to people about NSR, the one thing they say is, nobody listens to us because they can't find us. It's difficult to find us. If they're on a show, obviously they'll get the link and they'll download it, and that'll be the show that they're on. But the podcast idea was more about giving it a new identity, more about giving it a dedicated place online where it's simple to find. Like the Courier website is simple to find. Like the NUTV website on YouTube is there. You can see it's clear that you can see the shows. To brand them better, to have their own unique identity, that they already do, and they're all about different things. They're all fantastically done, but on the website at the minute they're just a stream of time with different slots. Whereas what I want to do is give them each their own unique selling point, so that people want to download them and want to come back each week and download them, even if they're not on them. So that would be through a website, a dedicated website in a minute.
Okay. I'm gonna take this to the audience, who I know have some questions, especially about this. James, you can raise the hand first.
Yes, I'm James. I'm one of the station managers along with Lorna this year for NSR. So, just kind of address to everyone a few points that have been raised tonight. So, firstly, it was mentioned that NUTV doesn't get watched by many people. The last fight night was watched by over 10,000 people. You mentioned that about an NSR app. We're already on the NUSU app, we're on the Uniways app, and we're on the TuneIn Radio app as well. You said to use the Courier social media to boost NSR. NSR has double the Courier's followers on Instagram. Oh yeah, and in writing the manifesto, only one person has actually spoken to us about what we want for NSR, and that was Rory. How do you expect us to believe that you can oversee and help student media when quite frankly I haven't a clue about NSR or NUTV?
Can I jump in at first? Thank you very much, James, for mentioning the following on social media, because that was something I was meaning to raise. And I can't actually remember exactly who raised it earlier about NSR being closeted away. Frankly, it is not. The marketing team over the last 2 years has worked tirelessly to make sure that NSR is as present as it can be. And this is something that the Courier is not going to just stand above it and do its own thing. It's something that the Courier can learn from NSR, because NSR have done a very good job over the last couple of years. And if I'm being honest, the Courier is playing catch up.
Can I say?
Yes.
Yeah, I completely agree. When we were talking about social media at the beginning of the year, which has had a massive change on the Courier this year, we actually said NSR's social media is a lot better than ours, because ours last year was pretty much non-existent, whereas NSR have polls, it's always updated, and for events like Fight Night, it's always up to date, there's always stories, so that was very much an inspiration for us. I don't think by any means that we need to be... I think we all should be sharing each other's things, especially for big events. But yeah, I don't necessarily agree that NSR is tucked away. I would also say I wish I did speak to you guys before putting things in my manifesto. That definitely would have been a good idea. I feel like from being a media exec with you guys, I do have an idea what you need. But I'd always be willing to listen. I don't want to stand up here and say, this is what I'll do with NSR, this is what I'll do with NUTV, because you're right. I don't know. I have ideas, and I'm sure you do as well. And that will be the main focus,
Molly,
is listening.
Sorry.
Can I just speak, please? Because I obviously was the one who brought up social media, and I want to apologise because I was just thinking about Facebook. I'm a bit of an old lady with social media, and I don't really go on Instagram as much as a lot of people do, and I honestly didn't know that about Instagram, so I would greatly apologise. I was referring to the shares that people's parents do on Facebook and that reach that we get, and it was nothing to do with Twitter, it was nothing to do with Instagram, and I should have clarified because I know the Courier is quite outdated. In terms of that, I was thinking about the outdated reach, to be honest, because that does get the clicks. So yeah.
Yeah, in terms of reaching out to NSR, it's true I didn't reach out to the managers of NSR because in terms of writing the manifesto, NSR and NUTV, NSR, because it's run, so I'm not trying to flatter you, but because it is run so well, and it is the development with it would be in how it's linked into the other, how it's promoted through the other branches of media. I did reach out to some people who have shows on NSR and asked them for their recommendations, which did inform my manifesto, but perhaps we could all, we all are editors for the Courier. None of us are managers of NSR and so that's why our manifestos are so focused on the Courier and trying to integrate it with the other stations, because we don't have as much experience with other stations. If I become the editor of the Courier, I'm not going to assume I know what's best for NSR. I'm going to ask the station managers at NSR, you currently, whoever it will be next year, what they want. What do you...
Sorry,
yes.
Can I jump in? Is that okay? I'm currently... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's because Ella has been
go on.
quiet for a time.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna second. I'm sorry I didn't speak to the station managers, but I have spoken to since my manifesto was released. I have spoken to quite a few people who have shows themselves. Some of them did mention a podcast point, which I think is a great one, because I do agree that that's kind of the way that radio is going at the moment. And people in lectures during radio shows. I know loads of people, when we had a radio show last year, people couldn't listen to it because they just weren't available. They could never listen to it because every Wednesday at 1 p.m. or whatever time it was, they had a lecture or something. So I do think that's a great shout. But NSF and NUTV, I see you.
Am I allowed to hop in, or are we short on time?
I think we're a little bit short
No,
on
no, no,
time,
no
and I
worries.
have a ton more questions. Sorry. One of the Twitter questions is from Carson, actually. Are you aware of the issues NUTV is currently facing, including funding issues and not being able to obtain industry standard software and hardware? Are you, as editor of the Courier candidate, planning to support NUTV on these issues?
Can I? I mean, I'll keep it short. I think we should, at some point, do some talking about the Courier, but I obviously these are massively important issues. I think it would absolutely be something that would need the editor of the Courier's support, and to me, that's what the relationship the editor should have to the other branches of student media, is being that support as a sabbatical officer, rather than informing creative decisions or anything like that. So yeah, that would absolutely be something that would be a concern to me.
Can I jump in quickly? Speaking to the master's academic staff on my production course for media production, it's mainly film, not TV, but I was spoken to them about NUTV and the kind of equipment deficit that there is between what Culture Lab has and what NUTV has, even though NUTV can put that equipment to such good use. I mean, they were fawning over a camera that I had in the office the other day that I got from Culture Lab. And they agree that the problem is that the academic staff don't know that this issue exists, and they don't know that this equipment can be put to good use. When I've raised the issue with them, they agreed to work with me over the summer to help loan out more equipment and put equipment aside for weekly use by NSR for NUTV, for whatever it needs.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna ask, I think, the question that is the elephant of the room for a lot of people. Ella, you have a very interesting point in your manifesto about the Courier as well, which is introducing a pull-out magazine style section for culture.
Didn't realise that was the elephant in the room, but okay.
I just had a lot of people asking me about this, so could you explain a little bit more about this point?
Well, I don't know if you have problems with it. I mean,
just I don't understand how you plan on doing it, and why do you think this is going to be a good measure to introduce?
Yeah, I mean, I think my reasoning behind it is because I think, as leader of the culture sections, I think they've been kind of blending into each other a bit, and I think it's they're quite often reduced with their creative freedom when they're trying to sort of match the news and the sports sections in terms of special formatting rules and things like that. I think it would really provide. I kind of want to overhaul the culture sections in general and provide them with much more creative freedom, including, like I've said in other things, more student talent, like illustrations and photography as well, and just making it more magazine style in the way it's laid out. I think it would really be worth having that separated off from the rest of the paper, just so that people, just because they have very different audiences, and I think it would just feel like you're getting more from the paper. And I think, like I said at the moment, that it's in this limbo state where you don't know whether it's part of the rest of the paper. It's not very clear when you move on to the culture sections of the paper, and I think, yeah, they have very different purposes. So that was my.
May I?
Thank you.
I think, while I see your reasoning for it, I think the reason it's an elephant in the room is because quite a lot of sub-editors are quite confused by it, and a lot of them, and I know that this definitely isn't your intention because you're obviously a culture editor yourself, but a lot of people think that it's sort of you get your own separate thing because you don't get to be in the real paper kind of thing. I think that while I see what you're saying, I think you'd either end up with two distinct brands, or you'd end up with both being the same Courier brand, but then it would be like, why are they apart? And for me, obviously they do have very different audiences, but we kind of rely on that as a paper. We rely on people to pick up the paper for, it might be puzzles, it might be blind date, it might be one article their friend has written, but we hope that while they're flicking through to that page, they'll see other things that catch their eye. I think if you can take half the paper away and get rid of the rest, that sort of defeats that purpose a little bit.
We had a pulp for many years, which was got rid of about 10 years ago, I think, which was a separate pull-out. And I agree with Molly on the reasons why it's
I do know about pulp, but back when they had that, there was a lot less culture sections, and I think then they've really been moving in a direction anyway where the style, especially this year, has been moving in a much more magazine-like direction. I just think there needs to be a way of marking that in the paper and saying these are the culture sections. In no way am I saying that they are a less important part of the paper, because am a culture editor. I care. In fact, it's so that they have more freedom in their own right to say this is our bit of the paper. It's not like a completely it's not the kind of section where it's smaller, or you pick it up paper and then it will just fall out. You know, it will be a pull out in the same sense as the Christmas pull out, which people love, and it will just unite all the culture sections together a bit more closely, and just I think it will be more kind of cohesive when you're reading the paper. And at the moment there's just two little things at the top saying culture. And
sorry, Ella, I might have to cut you. Amy, as editor of news, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I agree that it really creates a divide. Like, I think Lifestyle have done really well in the paper. They look magazine-like. They don't need to go that extra mile and make themselves separate. News gets accused of being boring as it is, so I think it's very clear when you go to Lifestyle, because all of a sudden there's a picture of like a nipple, and we obviously wouldn't have that on news, and I don't see why we'd be creating...
Shame if you ask me.
I know, yeah. I don't see why we'd be creating division when a lot of our talks are always about collaboration between different branches, between different sections, and I do agree that it just seems unnecessary division that wouldn't have to be there.
I don't think it would be division at all. I think it's all one part of the paper. I just think it would allow each to play to their own strengths, and they do have different strengths. By no means is news boring, and if people think it's boring, then I think that it shouldn't be made to look like the culture sections. I think they have different purposes in the paper. The news is to inform, and I think it's great if that looks nice, but you want to have more structured formatting. There's just different ways of doing it, and that's really all it is. It's just a cover section saying now we're entering the culture parts. You could take it out and read that bit if you want. I think it would work really well, and like I say, the only reason it hasn't worked in the past is because culture was like not where it's at now, and now I think it's already looking more magazine-y. You can tell that it just needs to happen. I don't quite know what you mean by we shouldn't go the extra mile. I think we always should, because it would just give people much more creative freedom, I think.
I wasn't saying the news content was boring. I'm saying we're very formal in our structures, and it's so obvious when you move away from that and go to Lifestyle. And when I say extra mile, I just mean it sounds like you just want to make a different magazine in itself, and I'm saying that's what I meant by that, not like the energy put in.
Okay, thank you. I just got another question from Twitter from Kat Mars. Kat. Sorry. Also, will any of you plan on streamlining writers' meetings? They can be very stressful for someone with anxiety when the room is packed, no one knows where to go, and can actually deter people from going. Rory, you had on your manifesto changing the...
Yeah, and this is a really important one for me, because I think for just a day-to-day student around university, it's actually really hard to access and find where exactly writers' meeting is. And as much as I'd love to think that everybody is going to be jumping at once to come to writers' meeting each week, I realise that's not the case. And I would rather have writers' meetings somewhere far more accessible on campus, somewhere that is easy to access, and somewhere that comes to mind for me is the Boiler House, which is obviously opposite the Union. It's got a lovely open entrance. It's been refurbished fairly recently, and somewhere like that you have people moving in and out of through the arches, at all times. And I think somewhere like that, each week you're probably going to find somebody new walking through at that time. And say if we had a nice big sign saying writers' meeting open to all, I think that gives people a real inclination to come in for the first time and pick an article.
Thank you. Anyone want to...
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Roy on that one. I think the only problem is I considered putting in the manifesto, putting the articles on Facebook at the same time as the writers' meeting begin. The only reason I didn't is because I worry then that the rapport that is built between the writers and the editors will deteriorate. I only applied to become a sub-editor 2 years ago because I got on really well with the film sub-editors at the time. And I think that, and also when some writers come along, they pitch ideas to us in person, we kick them back and forth. They want to know more about a specific thing. So moving the writers' meetings, I think, is a really doable idea. Getting rid of them entirely, I don't think any of us are proposing that. But I think we can all agree that the writers' meetings this year are much better than they were 2 years ago, actually, not last year, when it used to be a free-for-all to the front, and it was terrible. And if anybody has anxiety over that, I mean, we could always make exceptions on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
So you've all spoken a lot about the content of the paper, and from my personal experience as editor, I think we do have a fantastic paper already and we have great content, but what we really struggle with is distribution. So I was wondering if I could hear a bit more from you about that. We've also had a question in from the audience asking about paid distribution roles, what your opinions are on that, how that's going to work with the van, because currently the issue is that we can't pay people to drive the distribution van because of insurance purposes, but that takes up a lot of time on Monday mornings. So I'd like to hear what you all would do to combat this. We're also going to reduce the time for each candidate to answer to 45 seconds because we're running a little bit late.
Can I go? So I think it's so easy to say we should distribute to halls, we should do more distribution, but those of us who have done distribution every week know that it's a lot more, like you say, it's a lot more challenging. When we're getting sub-editors to put in hours every week for no money, it's then hard to expect them to get up at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning for no money. I think paid distribution roles absolutely need to happen. There is the massive issue of you can't pay the person in the van. I don't know what to do about that other than maybe getting a driver's license myself. And then I at least would be someone who is being paid to do it. But I think for people giving out papers around campus, that is something that needs to be sorted, and these people need to be compensated, not constipated, compensated before we then think about putting it in halls and putting them here, there and everywhere, because it's a massive issue and has been all this year and last year.
Can I just go, because distribution halls is my favourite policy, and I know it's controversial, but we were talking earlier about you don't see people reading prints, and that's because, especially as a first year, and you're a bit anxious about how you look, and you don't want to stop in the streets and pick up the paper and open the thing. It's nice to have it in a safe space near your accommodation, and I also do have a driver's licence, so I could drive up to Castle Leazes, but also I used to live there and I mastered walking there in 10 minutes. Like, you could storm around. I'd make it my personal job to like go to the far reaching places, because I think it's so important to get first years involved, and the best way to do that is in a relaxed environment, which is outside your bedroom.
I just want to say I think distribution in halls is a great idea. I'm just saying that I think we should sort the how it is first is already a bit chaotic. I think we should sort that first, but yeah, absolutely.
Can I come in on that? Yeah, distribution's a big part of my policy as well, because I agree with you. The content is important, but what if you haven't got any readers? That's something else. It would be great to get it there, and I think it would be a realistic goal. One of the ways I want to do it is just increasing, maybe having a weekly rota with particular people doing it on each day, and I think that would really help. If people knew, like, 1 week, because we have so many editors, if we kind of shared it a bit more evenly, I think that would really help. You knew when your week would be that you had to distribute and where to go, and then also I think tracking how many papers were going to each place and how many were taken, perhaps following up how many have been taken from each place, would be another way of reducing waste as well, which is a really important thing.
Just
Sorry.
Just follow up on Ella's point. I completely agree. Having a rota of who's doing what, because I know I've done distribution before, and it can be it's a bit all over the place. Who's going to be able to do it and things like that, and especially the issues of driving the van. Paid distribution was something that existed a couple of years ago, to my knowledge, and I think that that's something that we could consider bringing back. But again, I think it would have to be looking at, the thing with the van is a bit frustrating, having been out in the van with Pat before, and listening to a bit of his road rage, but it's fair road rage, to be honest.
A bit.
Can I jump in? Distribution is something that these debates in the last 2 years, it dominated the conversation, and it's something that I think year in, year out, there's no fixed solution to it. It keeps cropping up, and for me, this is where myself offering social media training and managers for each section is really important, because the distribution issue, it's here, and I don't think there is any real solid solution. What is here, and is such an untapped part of what we can offer, is social media. I think there's a lot of techniques from studying journalism and media that we are not producing at the Courier that I think I could train and help people to learn and understand next year.
So, Rory, I'd just like to ask you on that. You mentioned in your manifesto information about digital grants and introducing those for NUTV and NSR as well. What exactly would these grants be spent on?
I think especially advertisement online on social media, it's really, really important, and it's something that NSR were lucky to have last year, but I think I'm right in saying they haven't had access to this year, and I think they really reap the benefits. I spoke to James and Lorna at quite a lot of length about this, and it's something that they realised throughout last year was highly beneficial, and it's something I don't think the Courier we've benefited from that yet, but there's so much potential with just a little bit of investment for us to really grow and develop online. And that is where an awful lot of our audience, because we are, at an age demographic of largely 18 to 25-year-olds, our audience is online. They're not picking up newspapers.
And I think this raises, I agree with Becca on terms of the rotations and not having paid distribution yet until we can sort the van issue. I would also consider recycling old papers, because at the minute when we deliver a new batch, there's 2 weeks worth of old batches there. That's not great. But also consider limiting and reducing the amount that we actually print, because I know this is something that people might not, we're talking about bigging up the paper and improving it, but like Rory says, a lot of this is online now, and a lot of the concerns about people are the environmental impact of producing thousands of issues of paper each week.
Can I say the printers have like a minimum order though? So you literally couldn't do that?
We've changed printers in the past. We could change them in the future.
We have. I just want to say we didn't advertise it massively, but we did decrease papers by 1,000 this year. We went from 2,500 to 1,500. That's right, isn't it? And we do recycle all the papers. I just want to make that absolutely clear. We probably should have made a bigger deal of it, but
I think the fact of the matter is, when you're decreasing the amount of papers, you're therefore spending less money on creating papers in the first place, and this is where this money could really come in to boost our online presence. And I don't want to reiterate it, I've already said it, but our audience is online predominantly.
Can I say I find this conversation really sad that we're talking about the decline of print? I don't want to sound old, but it's so important to have something to hold, the layout. Having the online articles is just different, it's distant, and I think rather than giving up on print, that's why we need to get it in more strategic places, not dwindle it down.
I completely agree with that. At the same time,
we're enthusiastic.
We have to be realistic, and we have to look after our climate. We're bombarded with news these days about looking after our planet. It is simply not sustainable to have thousands of copies of the Courier going around not being picked up every year.
Can I say one more thing? Sorry, was that yes? Yes. Okay, cool. I agree with both of you, both the fact that our audience is online and we need to get a grip, and also the fact that it's incredibly sad. I just wanted to reiterate my manifesto I have about the environment. I would absolutely never scrap the physical paper. I mean, maybe not never, maybe when the planet's on fire, but for now, because it's got massive, massive benefits to us as sub-editors and to writers. Writers love seeing their name in print, and us as sub-editors, there are people on our sub-ed team who came in as journalists and now want to be graphic designers, and I even though we haven't been nominated for Design Award at the Spanks this year, I dare you to find a newspaper that looks as good as ours. So I think the physical print is important, distribution is important, but yeah, you're right, our audience is totally online, and that's something we have to face up to.
Beck, I can see you're dying.
yeah, bursting a little bit. No, I think that everyone makes really valid points. I think Rory makes a really valid point about online being something that's really increasing. But I think that you just can't demean print in the slightest. I think print is a fantastic way for editors to really express themselves, and for my personal opinion, I've been able to really get creative with sports layups. I've seen culture layups which look fantastic. Lifestyle always produce fantastic layups, and I think that print is a really, really good chance for people to really sort of discover things about themselves which they hadn't with their creations. So I think, while we've all got to recycle, we've all got to make sure that the papers which maybe don't get picked up do go somewhere and are going to be disposed of correctly. I don't think that we can talk completely about sacking off print.
That's why it's really important to obviously reduce the numbers, but not to bin it completely. And I would never want to bin print newspapers.
We've also got to think that us as sub-editors, we want to go into a lot of us want to go into this industry, and we need to develop the skills in graphic design in physical editing. The issue with us is finance, essentially. If you go to work for a regional or national newspaper, those issues aren't there, but the skills are still required. So it's a fine balancing act.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I wouldn't want to reduce the prints at all, but this is why a lot of my manifesto is to do with readership. I think if you're not wasting, I think I want to focus on not wasting the prints of the paper. It's kind of what people have already said, but I've got so many policies on this because I think it's one of the most important things. The whole point of the Courier is that it's this 65-year-old newspaper, and I want to keep that legacy going. I agree that we need to focus on online, and that's why I've talked about the website and things, but I think you can do both, and I think it's so, like everyone has said, seeing your name in print, that's what the paper's all about, in my opinion.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're gonna have to close it now because I'm pretty sure our producers are killing themselves. So we're gonna do a last round of audience questions, if that's all right. I know. Okay, Rachel, you put the hand up before. So,
The editing team and the writing team do not reflect the uni in terms of diversity, which obviously means that because we're a news publication, the things that we're hearing and the things that we're reading are pretty skewed and biased, or we're just not hearing everyone's voice. What would you do to rectify that?
This isn't something that I explicitly put in my manifesto just because it's something I care a lot about, but I wanted my manifesto to be solid things that I know I could pretty much promise. I don't think that our editing team and our writing team reflects the student body, and I really wish it did. My solution to this would be the elephant in the room is there's a lot of LGBT people on our sub-ed team and on our writing team, but there aren't as many people of colour. My solution to this would be to speak to people of colour and ask them why they don't want to write for the paper, why they don't want to be sub-editors, because I can't, as a white person, say, this is why. I don't know the reason. I think we need to listen more and incorporate what we hear into that, because you're right, it's massively important that we're more diverse and that we reflect the student body so that our journalism also reflects the student body.
Can I follow up quickly? So this is something that is really important, and I reflect on this in my manifesto where I say that I think it's important and required that all sabbatical officers have apt training at the start of the year to understand exactly what student media is and what it has to offer, because at the end of the day, these are people that are meant to represent absolutely everybody at university, and therefore they need to come to us when they have something that they want us to publicise about, and we are there and they know exactly what that we're able to do effectively.
Can I just say also the outreach to societies would help with that, because if they have a port of call to come to, we'll go to. I was just talking to the. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name. But either way, societies with people of all different backgrounds, all different colours, and they message us because they're talking about their society that they want to talk about. So if they know they come to us every week about it, and then they get in contact with sub-editor, then they might think, maybe I should write this article, maybe I should do this. And getting them involved every week would help them get involved over the year in general. Like, they will actually be the writers rather than just proposing, like, this story you should write about.
Can I just come in on this very quickly? The first thing I asked when I took my first interview with Louise Hall, who was the editor last year, for the position was, why do we not have many writers who write for us, who came along to us on the Freshers' Fair, who are not white British? I said, is it a language issue? No. Is it a confidence issue? I don't know. That's why and it's an issue that's been racking around in my brain for the last 2 years, which is why my first 2 points in my manifesto are about an international news page and a Your Voice page. But with that, they're just words. With that would mean collaboration with societies like Mind the Gap, who I've spoken to in the past. I know, not in here at the minute, but somebody and they say, we would really appreciate a place in your paper to represent this proportion of our student body who just don't have a voice.
Sorry, Joe, I'm going to have to cut you there.
So that's why those 2 points are there.
Anyone else?
I think Ella had something to say there.
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to say this is something, again, I just want to second the fact that this is something I'm really passionate about. Throughout the time as editor, I've been really, really pushing, talking about different people's experiences and different students and trying to get as many as possible. This is why I started that Humans of Newcastle column in Lifestyle, and we also tried to talk about loads of different issues, things that people don't want to talk about. We talked about eating disorders, mental health, feminism, all this, and I think it's so important to spread that throughout the whole paper. So, I want to spread what I did with Lifestyle and what I've done with culture to the whole paper in terms of inclusivity. I think it's just a matter of listening, talking, there is definitely a confidence issue or something that's blocking people. It's just getting to the bottom of that.
Yeah, just to chip in as well. Similar to Amy's point, I think that that's where societies can really, really come in. Having a whole range of people getting involved and getting interested, and obviously at the start of the year, emailing societies and being like, we're going to have this brand new page, we're really interested to see what you're doing, get in contact with us, and I think this is the perfect opportunity for a wide range of people across campus to get involved.
Thank you. There's another question in the audience. There's multiple questions in the audience. Okay.
Going back to talking about the ratio of online to paper copies, would you at all, for the people that are talking more to moving it online, would you be at all worried about taking that level off the print and moving it online? Do you think that would deter the amount of people actually wanting to write for the paper if they're not going to be seeing their articles out there? Like, say, how important it is seeing your name in print? Do you think that would actually deter people from wanting to write to you and deter the quality of the courier? Simply put, I'm just going to begin. Simply put, no. We just need to look at the tab, another online publication around Newcastle and every student city, and it's thriving. They have active members across every major student city in the country, so no.
Can I say it's too quick to just say no? My first article I ever wrote for the Courier, the person laying it up accidentally deleted my name, and I was really, really upset. Like, not crying, but like that's a nice thing to show someone, and I do think it will deter people. Obviously, your name is out there forever online, but it's quite nice to have a bundle to be like, my name's in all of them, and I do think it would deter a certain group of people. Maybe not everyone, but a bunch.
I think the people who want to have their name in the paper will pick up the paper and see their name in it. And in terms of reducing the number of print, the numbers we're talking about are 10 to 30%. And the amount of, in terms of the, we all know as sub-editors, we get consistent writers. I can see someone in this room who write for us every week. And those are the ones who will pick up the paper. And new writers coming along will do the same. So I don't see that as an issue.
I mean, I agree. I don't think necessarily cutting down the amount of papers has been an issue. We did it this year and no one noticed. But yeah, I definitely think, I don't think you can really compare us to the Tab. People write for the Tab because thousands and thousands of people read the Tab's website. And until we get the Courier to that point, which would obviously be great, I don't think we have the same pull. I think people do read the Courier because people do write for the Courier, because it's laid up beautifully and they get to see their name and their article next to some beautiful artwork. I think that's massively part of the pull. But yeah, like I said, I don't think decreasing the copies would necessarily matter, because if someone wanted one, they would get their hands on one. But yeah, I think that the physical paper definitely has a pull for writers.
Thank you.
I was going to second that, but I was going to mention, I really don't think we should become like the Tab, and I'm worried that if we start going in that direction. I think it is such a big publication. We need to have our own identity as a print paper. What the other thing I was going to say was, but it was good, but never mind.
I think this is where it's important to try and strike the balance between online and print, because like everyone's mentioned, print is such a pull factor. I remember the first article I ever wrote in my first year, I sent it straight away to my mum. It's like, my name's in print. But I think as well, it's trying to appeal to a different range of audiences. So I think it was mentioned before that writers are maybe more likely to pick up a physical copy, and that's fine. But it's also making sure that we've got the stuff online as well. Writers, if they send things off to various companies or employers, they've still got that their article to send away, and obviously it is nice to have physical copies as well. So yeah, just the balance between online and print is really, really important.
Thank you. Another question. Okay. You.
One thing I've noticed is that different sections of the paper, even in the culture section, where a lot of them have double-page spreads, have different numbers of sub-editors. Now, I get part of that is probably to do with the fact that, for whatever reason, there's like a limited number of people who applied to edit certain sections of the paper. But my question is really two in one. Like, one, would you make any adjustments to the number of sub-editors on the newspaper, and why? And two, if certain sections have low applications, I think Ollie, you mentioned the beauties only one page here because of that. What would you do to encourage more people to kind of apply for certain sections?
I opened my mouth and completely forgot what I was going to say. So I personally, I would always rather have a bigger team. I'd rather have the biggest team possible. I think then people don't have to work as hard. People can meet more people. I'd like for the paper to be not as long as it could possibly be, but I'd like all sections to have their equal space. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
It was what you would do. Girls,
Yeah, of course, yeah. So what happened this year, both with beauty and with travel, is we initially didn't get that many applications. I think people dropped out, and Grace advertised it really well, and then we got way more applications we needed. It was the same thing for social media managers. So I think advertising it well and in the right places is definitely the right way to go to getting a bigger team. And that's just something we have to focus on, really. And creating an environment where writers want to become sub-editors is a massive thing. You and yourself and a lot of people in this room became sub-editors for the paper because they were writers and because we have relationships with them.
The same thing happened with the editors that we appointed halfway through the year as well. I think we had a TV editor drop out, and we advertised the role that was open halfway through the year, and for some reason that was really, really popular. So I am interested in what the difference was there and how we can get that interest throughout the year. I do think that the Courier's had a bit of a moment this year in terms of popularity. Most of the writers' meetings are chock-a-block, and so I do have faith that there'll be plenty of people applying next year. I know lots of regulars are already interested.
And I think for the pages that have struggled to get applicants this year, that's not going to be an issue next year, particularly for returning writers, because those pages, food, beauty, have been some of the best pages we've done this year. The layout's consistently brilliant, the design, and I think that's the only way to do it, really, other than advertise it, is just to show that it's an appealing place to come and write for. It's an appealing place to come and want to be an editor for, because you get to do fantastic things, you get to cover really interesting stories, and you get to make the paper look really good.
Just to jump in as well, we've had a similar thing in sport. So initially sport started out with 3 sub-editors. The time that I started in, it got boosted up to 5 because we simply just couldn't cope with laying up 5 pages by ourselves. So I think playing it by ear and seeing what sub-editors want next year is really, really key. If somebody feels like someone in their team isn't pulling their weight, or there's not enough people to physically do their section, I think it's important to listen to them and to see what needs to happen, but that's something that's going to have to be played by ear.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with what Becca said. I mean, it was evident last year that sport was struggling. We got a couple more editors in, and that's where I appeared. And yeah, it's really just playing by ear with sub-editors within each section about, numbers-wise. If they're struggling, we'll obviously advertise for more positions, and if not, happy days.
Thank you. We're going to have to cut it there because they're going to kick us out of the room at this point.
But if anyone has any more questions, next week on Monday from 12 o'clock onwards, I think in Luther's, the SU is organising a question time or hosting session. So if you have any questions to bring along to ask the candidates for editor or any of the other positions, come join us in Luther's, and there'll be hot drinks and cake available as well. So that's nice.
Can I say one last thing about my pull-out section, because I felt like I didn't...
Would it be okay if you waited for your... so everyone will get a 45-second closing statement. Is it okay if you put it in there? Just
okay, but I've got one written. But can I just...
Do you mind doing it? Because we're really short on time and we really need to finish up. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just felt quite like I didn't get enough time. Like a lot of people coming out with lots of different ideas about it. I didn't get enough time to...
Sorry.
Okay, well...
we're going to do the 45 seconds. We're going to start the opposite side. So, Rebecca, you can start now.
So I hope that these debates have expanded upon my manifesto points and given you a better sense of who you should vote for. If you want more online coverage from the Courier, more investigative journalism from the Courier, better marketing for student media, more collaboration between branches of student media, and more sport and society coverage, please vote Rebecca number 1 from March 16th for your editor of the Courier. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Ella?
Well, I'm not sure whether to read out what I've got written here or address some of the stuff that's been brought up in this debate, but I do kind of wish that people had addressed these concerns to me before if it was such an elephant in the room, because I've always been open about it. I knew it would be a divisive issue, and I think that I'm really passionate about it. I think it would be a really good thing for the paper, so I kind of wonder why people haven't, especially like culture editors and people who've been editing at the moment, or if you've got an issue with it, I'd love to know, because I've got so many ideas I want to bring with it. I'm not going to have time to read out this all, but I just wanted to summarise my main points. I hope I've demonstrated how much this paper means to the university, and there's so much more. I truly believe the paper would flourish with a more creative, innovative outlook like mine. So vote for Ella for editor for a bigger, brighter student newspaper that we can all be proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to NSR and NUTV for putting on these debates. Many people probably think this debate has nothing to do with them, and that's one of the main things I want to change. I want student media to be as important to all students as it is to those of us standing here, and the way to do this is to run a paper that serves the students first and foremost. A vote for me is a vote for more investigations, talks and workshops, personal stories from writers, and a more environmentally conscious Courier. So if you like the sound of this, please make me number 1 on March 16th.
you, Amy.
I hope this talk, and if you've read it, my manifesto, shows how much I just want to prioritise expanding the outreach of the paper. I really want people to read it that have never read it before, which is why first year holds is my main point. And it's not been brought up, which I really thought it was, but coupons, because again, people who would never read the newspaper, like a little 20% pint at Luther's, like that would get me opening the paper and going down there. And I think we need to not focus on the people who read it. We do need to focus on the people that don't read it, and then print wouldn't be in decline, and we wouldn't be struggling to like justify the paper. We shouldn't have to justify it. We should reach out to people who never would before, and I really think I have the ability to do that. None of my friends read the Courier. Maybe they do now. You know, I really get everyone who don't do it to do it, because like I've got that personality.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to cut you there. Rory.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, and to Grace. Thank you to everybody who has come along tonight to watch our discussions, and to the organisers who have put on another great evening of debates. I'm very passionate about student media, and I have seen some of the amazing content we can produce. It's grateful to be a part of. And I want to give students a realisation that the Courier and student media is their first port of call regarding news going on around their university and their union. This position is something that excites me a lot, and I hope my ideas intrigue you all too. I genuinely believe that if we can implement these changes, they will continue the upward curve of growth that student media has seen in recent years. So thank you, and please vote Rory #1 for Courier editor.
Thank you. Joe.
I did have a prepared closing statement, but it was mainly just saying vote for me and repeating a lot of the things that have been said today. All I will say is this: I came to this university wanting to be a historian, a history teacher. I was one of those boring people. And I went along to that first meeting, and for a while I didn't feel like this paper was for me and this job was for me. But over the last 4 years, and the last 2 years in particular, I've realised that this is what my passion is, and I have ideas, and I have things to say and things I want to do. So when it comes to May 16th, I hope you put your trust in me, and I'll make this the paper for you and for every student at this new university.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to the people who submitted questions on NUSU. Debates, whatever the hashtag was. Yeah, just good luck to everyone in the elections, and we'll see.
Thank you.